Life.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد, inshallah, please pass me the books. Father, bring the ladder. Tonight's class, inshallah, is going to be on wal-Marjan فيما اتفق عليه الشيخان of Muhammad Fuad Abdul Baqi rahimahullah ta'ala. Compilation of hadiths from Sahih Bukhari and from Sahih Muslim. And as we retrieve these books right now, inshallah ta'ala, brothers and sisters, for those who are watching online, you see them? To your left. Very briefly, when we get to this, inshallah, I know we left off. As we say, what you should have done was to do what we call at-tahdir. At-tahdir, in which you yourself prepare for the class. Just like a teacher is supposed to prepare for the class and review for the class, you are supposed to prepare and review for the class. So, what are the hadiths we're going to read tonight? What are the chapter hadiths we're going to read tonight? Have you memorized them? Have you read them in Arabic and English? What are some potential problems or things that need further explanation? What are some of the issues going to be that we're going to bring up and talk about tonight? What are some of the side branches that you can deduce and extract? Prepare in a style and in a mode in which we have shown you in countless classes. Also review. What did we take in the last chapter? What hadith did we go over? What sharh did we give? What fiqh issues came up? And this applies to any class that you're going to go to that is an actual class. As far as a lecture, then that's a different story. But actual dars ilmi, a science-like class, a knowledge-based class, especially about something such as important as the sunnah and the fiqh of the sunnah and the comparative study of the hadith regarding the halal and the haram. So that's general advice, general words of wisdom, with regards to enhancing and increasing your search of knowledge in a systematic way. Now, inshallah. I believe the last thing that we did was chapter number 25, with regards to staying at night during the blessed month of Ramadan. Staying at night during the blessed month of Ramadan. Also, chapter number 24, with regards to the virtue of making dhikr and invoking Allah, supplicating to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala all of the time, but in a special or specific part of the night or section of the night. And why? What happens every night at that time? Nah? And that is a tremendous, tremendous issue in itself. Calling on Allah, asking Allah, begging Allah, seeking Allah's forgiveness at night, the third of the night, the wee hours of the night, and how merciful and how kind Allah is to His servants. And He doesn't have to be that way. No one forces Him to be that way. He needs nothing from us. So it's very important when we talk about one's creed, one's aqidah, one's tawheed. What do you believe in of Allah's asma wa sifat? With regards to one's spiritual worship, one's practice of the deen. And we always say the 1-2 punch of the believer: technicality, spirituality. Spirituality and technicality. We believe in Allah's names and attributes in a manner that befits Him. This is correct, this is affirmed, this hadith, this is incorrect, this is a bid'ah, this isn't the right aqidah, this is ta'weel, this is distortion of Allah's attributes, etc. That's the technical issues, or those are the technical issues. That's the technicality. And then what do we get from this? Allah hears and sees, Allah speaks, Allah loves, Allah hates, Allah has mercy. What do we get from these things? Allah is above all of His creations, subhanahu azza wa jalla, al-aliyyul a'la. There has to be an effect on you as a person for you to know and for you to actually believe and realize that there's someone who's always above you. It has to mean something. It has to have an effect on you. Calling out to Allah azza wa jalla, asking Him, begging Him for whatever you need of the good of this life and the good of the hereafter. So that hadith, which we explained in its correct meaning, when Allah azza wa jalla calls out to His servants and He asks, is there anyone who needs something or wants something or requests something? That is a real hadith and a true hadith, and it is not figurative. And it's not the angels. It's not an angel. It is Allah Azza wa Jal who's speaking, calling out to his servants. Now, khairan inshallah ta'ala. So chapter number 25, it says, Bab al-Tarqeeb fi Qiyam Ramadan wa Tarawih. The recommendation of standing, he says, fi Qiyam Ramadan. Standing in Ramadan, and that is at-Tarawih. A few issues that we brought up in the last couple of classes, Khalid, was what is meant by standing at night. And what is the term of the title? Is it Tarawih? Is it Qiyam? Is it Tahajjud? Is it Qiyam al-Layl? Etc. Huh? We said sometimes these words and terms are synonymous, and other times they're what? They have separate entities or separate meanings and separate concepts. Naam, khairan inshallah ta'ala. So, bidnillah ta'ala, let's move forward to the Sharh al-Nawawi along with chapter number 25. It says, Hadith Abi Hurairah radiyallahu anhu, أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال من قام رمضان إيمانا واحتسابا غفر له ما تقدم من ذنبه. Narrated Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu. Allah's Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, whoever establishes during the nights of Ramadan faithfully, out of sincere faith and hoping to attain Allah's rewards, all his past sins will be forgiven. Hadith 436. حديث عائشة رضي الله عنها أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم خرج ذات ليلة من جوف الليل فصلى في المسجد. نعم, we read that hadith as well. النووي رحمه الله تعالى, he says here, معنى إيمانا تصديقا بأنه حق مقتصد فضيلته ومعنى احتسابا أن يريد الله تعالى وحده لا يقصد رؤية الناس ولا غير ذلك مما يخالف الإخلاص. والمراد بقيام رمضان صلاة التراويح واتفق العلماء على استحبابها واختلفوا في أن الأفضل صلاتها منفردا في بيته أم في جماعة في المسجد. فقال الشافعي وجمهور أصحابه وأبو حنيفة وأحمد وبعض المالكية وغيرهم الأفضل صلاتها جماعة كما فعله عمر بن الخطاب والصحابة رضي الله عنهم، واستمر عمل المسلمين عليه لأنه من الشعائر الظاهرة فأشبه صلاة العيد. وقال مالك وأبو يوسف وبعض الشافعية وغيرهم الأفضل فرادى في البيت لقوله صلى الله عليه وسلم أفضل الصلاة صلاة المرء في بيته إلى المكتوبة. First and foremost, Nawawi rahimahullah, he says that the hadith, when it says imanan wahtisaban, he who stands, and it says in the English translation, he who establishes. It's not a good translation at all. Man qama, he who stands, he who prays. He says imanan wahtisaban, based off of iman and ihtisab, these two words. As far as the first part that says iman, then it is for one to believe and for one to acknowledge and accept and avow the fact that it is true. That it is true. And for one to wish to obtain the virtue of these prayers during this blessed month. And as far as ihtisaban, then it means for the servant to want Allah alone without any partner, and not to be seen by men or heard by men or praised by men or anything else which goes against one's purity, which goes against one's purity and sincerity. Fulan is standing, Fulan is praying, MashaAllah, he's righteous, he's pious, Fulan is leading the salah, Fulan is this, Fulan is that. Nah, if that happens, that's nothing to do with you. If they even praise you and laud you, alhamdulillah, has nothing to do with you. What's important is that that isn't your intention. That's not what you want. Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala then says, and what's meant by standing in Ramadan is Tarawih. Tarawih. Next point. It says, the ulama of Islam unanimously agree that it is recommended to offer these prayers during this month. They unanimously agree. However, next point, they differ on how exactly these prayers should be made. They differ on what's best for these prayers during the night of the blessed month of Ramadan. Should one make them by himself or by herself, Should they be done individually, or should they be made in congregation? Should they be made in a group? I don't understand how you study fiqh now. How you study fiqh sunnah. You take the main point, then you do what? Start breaking it down. Next point, next point, next point. And the issues get narrower, more and more and more narrow. They agree in general. They disagree, Kevin. I'm going to understand this? Proofs, evidences, Malik, Shafi, Af. You have to have all of this in your mind as student knowledge. Moving forward. He says, as far as the Shafi'i rahimahullah, and most of his students, also Abu Hanifa, and Imam Ahmed, and some Maliki scholars, he says the they hold the view is best for it to be done in Jana'ah. Tarawih should be made in congregation, and not individually. Just as it was done and established by Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, and just as the companions did it, and just as it has been something that has been practiced by the Muslims generation after generation after generation after generation. Pay close attention here to these qara'in, qara'in al-tarjih, these points here, which make a view stronger or better. Umar radiallahu anhu, who's Umar? What's his status? What was his knowledge? What do the hadith say about following what the companions did, Khulafa al-Rashidin? Keep that in mind. The Sahaba as a whole, maybe not all of them, but as a whole. Fahm al-Salaf, La tajtami ummati ala dhulala, etc. Keep all this in your head. Then the Muslims, meaning the fuqaha, the ulama, the righteous pious Muslims, they did it over and over and over again, year after year after year, up until the time of Noah. They're going to keep doing a bid'ah, or going to keep doing something that's wrong. Keep these points what? In your head. Those points individually may not be strong enough, but collectively, and it applies to any other issue. What's the ruling on doing this? What's the ruling on doing that? Hasan al-Basri rahimahullah, he used a proof and an evidence that men don't have to get circumcised, that it's not obligatory. This. He says in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, how many people accepted Islam? He says, al-aswadu wal-ahmar, the red and the black, the yellow, the green, everyone accepted Islam. And there aren't any hadiths in which the Prophet ﷺ commanded each and every one of them to circumcise himself. We're not here to discuss the ruling on male circumcision. We're making a point of the usage of the dalil, is that it was something that was inherited and passed down by the Muslims. And those who say that circumcision upon men is obligatory, they use the exact opposite. They say it the same way in the opposite way. They say that it was known to be practiced by the Muslims, generation after generation after generation. So this means something when we talk about fiqh. That which is known to the Muslims, that which is passed down by the Muslims. I understand this? But this point by itself may not necessarily always be the strongest point, because there are certain things that the Muslims do which are wrong, unfortunately, of bid'ah, of cultural jahiliyyah. Everyone understand this? So you have to be mindful on how to use these points, right? Moving forward. He says here, another point why it is to be done in congregation, لأنه من الشعائر الظاهرة, is that it's an outward manifestation of the religion. It's a thing which shows the strength of the deen. It's the flexing of the muscles of the religion. The Muslims are alive, they're together, they're united, and they can pray in the masjid at night during Ramadan. And it's similar to the Eid prayer. What is the status of the Eid? Is the Eid obligatory? Is it fard kifaya? Is it fard ayn? Al-muhim, the Eid is a manifestation of what? The strength of the Muslims, the unity of the Muslims. The Muslims have a holiday, the Muslims have a day off, the Muslims in the park, on the news. Everyone understand this? Very important points. He then says, as far as Imam Malik and Abu Yusuf, who was one of the main disciples of Abu Hanifa, a disciple could differ with his teacher. And look here, the main disciple, one of the main disciples is not blindly following and fanatically clinging to Abu Hanifa. Understand this? Imam Abu Hanifa was the greatest faqih who ever lived. A woman hasn't given birth to a man more intelligent than him. People, they say this today. Maybe that's true. Maybe, perhaps, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Allahu Alam. But that did not mean anything to his what? Students. Main pupil. And if anyone knew the intelligence of Abu Hanifa and how great of a faqih it was, it would be who? Abu Yusuf. Or some person in Birmingham in 2018. You understand this? So it's common sense now. Yet still he did what? It's his teacher. Everyone understand this? So we say all of the time, fanaticism, right? Has nothing to do with what? The way of the ulama. To be a fanatic. And to just cling to my scholar always knows, and he's the best, and you can't go against him, as we suffer from today. Abu Yusuf and also some of the Shafi'is, they didn't fanatically cling to what Shafi'i said. Imam Shafi'i was the greatest faqih. He was the one who made the hybrid style of hadith and fiqh. He was the one who brought usul al-fiqh. He was balanced. Those Shafi'i scholars, they what? They went against him. Everyone understand this? Like, he says here, these ulama, they hold the view that the best thing to do is to make the prayer individually. To make the prayer what? Individually and not collectively. And not what? Not collectively. Everybody clear on this or not? Moving forward. He says, just like the Prophet ﷺ did. He made it individually. Moving back to the translation. No, he doesn't say that. He says, as the Prophet ﷺ said, it's a correction. The best prayer for a man to make is in his home, except for the fard prayer, the maktuba. That's the proof that they use, or that's one of the proofs that they use. The best prayer for a man to make is where? In his house, except for the maktuba. And tarawih at nighttime is not the maktuba. So that's a brief discussion of the issue. Everyone clear on this? Moving forward. قوله صلى الله عليه وسلم غفر له ما تقدم من ذنبه المعروف عند الفقهاء أن هذا مختص بغفران الصغائر دون الكبائر. قال بعضهم ويجوز أن يخفف من الكبائر ما لم يصادف صغيرة. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, if he stands in the month of Ramadan based off of iman and ihtisab, he'll be forgiven of his previous sins. He says that which is well known to the people of knowledge, the fuqaha, that this hadith means minor sins and not major sins. Minor sins and not major sins. As if the hadith says, he who stands and prays for Tarawih in Ramadan, and he believes in it, and hopes for its rewards from Allah, Allah forgive him of his past minor sins. Some of them, they say, and Nawawi says, that it's possible for these good deeds or this here to have takhfif, to lessen and to lighten the burden of the major sins. Or if there is no what? Minor sin that he falls into. Meaning, a person makes wudu, a person makes the prayer, a person shakes his brother's hand, a person does all of these righteous acts to remove what? Minor sins. And then he prays in the month of Ramadan. Where does it go? Where does it what? You understand the issue here? Where does it go? As if a person is saying, this person at this time has no what? Minor sins. So where does it go? He says it can do what? Lessen some of the major sins and not necessarily remove them. Everyone understand this? An-Nawawi rahimahullah in Kitab Tahara of the Sharh, he speaks about this issue and he says that some of them say that if it doesn't lessen some of the kaba'ir, or if a person doesn't perform any kaba'ir, then it's more hasanat. It's more what? It's more hasanat. Everyone understand this? What's being said? Right, moving forward. And that's the issue among the ulama of Islam with regards to do righteous deeds, expiate major sins or just minor sins. Now, we've discussed that in some classes before as well. It then says, then we have some other versions here with regards to outside of Sahih Bukhari and just in Sahih Muslim. Let's move forward. The next narration is the narration of Aisha, 436. Once in the middle of the night, Allah's Messenger ﷺ went out and prayed in the mosque, and some men prayed with him. The next morning, the people spoke about it and so more people gathered and prayed with him. They circulated the news in the morning, and so on the third night the number of people increased greatly. Allah's Messenger ﷺ came out and they prayed behind him. On the fourth night, the mosque was so crowded that the people, or by the people, till it could not accommodate them. Allah's Messenger ﷺ came out only for the Fajr prayer, and when he was finished the prayer, he faced the people and recited Tashahhud. And then said, Amma ba'd, verily your presence was not hidden from me, but I was afraid that this prayer might be made compulsory and you might not be able to carry out. I know what he says about this hadith. فيه جواز النافلة جماعة ولكن الاختيار فيها الانفراد إلا في نوافل مخصوصة والعيد والكسوف والاستسقاء وكذا التراويح إن الجمهور كما سبق. He says in this hadith is the permissibility of making voluntary prayers in congregation. Praying jama'ah, what? In congregation. Praying nafila, what? In jama'ah, in congregation. He says in this hadith is the permissibility of making nafila prayers, what? In congregation. Together. Understand? He says here, however, al-ikhtiyar, listen carefully, he says that which is best and that which we select and we pick is that a person should make these voluntary prayers by him or herself and not in congregation. Unless there is a specific voluntary prayer, a prayer that is voluntary but is specifically noted to be done in congregation, such as al-Eid, the Eid prayer. So we believe, or we see here, we benefit that Nawawi rahimahullah, he has the view that the Eid prayer is what? Voluntary. He believes that the Eid is what? Voluntary. Nafila, and not fard. All of the ulama don't agree that the Eid is fard or nafila. They differ on that, like we just said. Like we just said. He also says, or al-kusuf, the eclipse. The what? Solar, lunar or solar? Which one? Or both? Both. Which one? Khalid. Khusuf or kusuf? Which one is for the sun and which one is for the moon? Muhim, the prayer that's made for the eclipse. We benefit here, and we're not talking about the eclipse prayer specifically, is that the eclipse prayer, according to Nawawi, is only voluntary. He also says, al-istisqa, the prayer for seeking rain when there's a drought. He also says, and also tarawih, and this is the view of most of the fuqaha, he says, most of them. I.e., we benefit from that. There are some fuqaha who believe that these voluntary prayers should be La. We said that already. The most of the fuqaha hold that view. These prayers. Most of them. Meaning that some of them who say that
they could be made by
they
themselves.
can and they should be made together. Now, let's ask ourselves a question now, really briefly. If the Prophet ﷺ made voluntary prayers with his companions, and a few hadiths, Ibn Abbas, when he spent the night, Maymuna radiallahu anha, this hadith here, other narrations, etc. One, like we said, it proves that it's what? Permissible. But it shouldn't be done what? All of the time. The proof for making Salat al-Tarawih, the initial proof, not what Umar did or the companions or the Muslims, but the initial dalil that Tarawih can be made in congregation is what?
This hadith.
It's the hadith of the Prophet. How often did the Prophet make the Tarawih prayer with the companions? Every time or just a few times? So could not one also use the argument against them and say that the Tarawih is permissible to be made?
Sometimes.
But it shouldn't be done? No, as if he's saying to simplify this, it's permissible to occasionally perform voluntary prayers, what? in congregation, occasionally, because the Prophet did it once or twice here and there. Stop. Pause the tape. It's permissible to make Taraweeh in congregation and should be done in every night in Ramadan because the Prophet did it a few times. Same or different? Or different?
Different.
Same or different? Scared. Same. Like, once more. How many hadiths when the Prophet prayed Taraweeh? Or let's simplify things. Did the Prophet make Taraweeh every single night in congregation? Yes or no?
No.
Without a question. There's no scratching and stuttering. The hadith says, I knew you were there. I was afraid to come out because I was... But when I get into other proofs and evidences here, the Prophet has passed away, there's no more legislation coming down. That's done. Clear. Omar did it. We're not getting to that. We're just dealing with the initial deal. The Prophet made Taraweeh a few in congregation. The Prophet prayed other nafila prayers a few times in congregation. So it's absolute sunnah to make Taraweeh in congregation, but it's a conditional, limited sunnah to make the voluntary prayers in congregation. It's consistent or inconsistent?
Consistent.
What you do?
It's inconsistent.
Without a question. It's totally inconsistent. You didn't get it. Brothers and sisters online, put on your thinking kufis, huh? I don't know if they said it anymore. We were in school, they would tell us, put on your what? Your thinking caps, right? Put on your thinking, Sufi kufis, right? Tell you. Once more, the initial dalil, I quote precisely, for no one to say, oh, if I'm sorry, it says the initial dalil of making Taraweeh in congregation is what? Hadith in which the Prophet did it only a few times. Sahih? Okay. The proof that you can make voluntary prayers in Jama'ah is that the Prophet did it what? A few times. Why is this only done a few times and it's done every night in Ramadan? When the initial dalil is the same. You at my? You're not there yet. Like, think about it, inshallah. You there or not, Mukhtar? No. You with me, Khalid? Alameen, you with me? Alright, let's repeat ourselves now. So this hadith, it says here, hadith 436. What happened in this hadith? It says, فَصَلَّى فِي الْمَسْجِدِ. The Prophet said he prayed where? فَصَلَّى رِجَالٌ بِصَلَاتِهِ. And men also, they joined with him. Meaning that the Prophet went in the masjid by him what? Self, with no intention of leading. But the people, clear? Right, move on to the next point. فَأَصْبَحَ النَّاسُ فَتَحَدَّثُوا. The next morning the people start what? Talking. Oh, subhanAllah, we pray with the Prophet, the virtue of the Rasul. Start talking about it, right? Tahaddathu, right? In the morning time. What happened what? Last night. Right, moving forward. فَاجْتَمَعَ أَكْثَرَ أَوْ أَكْثَرُ مِنْهُمْ فَصَلَّوْا مَعَهُ. The next day they did what?
They went back.
They gathered even, and they also prayed with him. You with me? Moving forward. فَكَثُرَ أَهْلُ الْمَسْجِدِ مِنَ اللَّيْلَةِ الثَّالِثَةِ. The third night the masjid was even more packed. فَخَرَجَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ فَصَلَّوْا بِصَلَاتِهِ. The third night he did what? He prayed his prayer where? In the masjid. And the people also, they were there. They were waiting for him. With a larger crowd, correct? With a what? A larger crowd. Moving forward to the Hadith Mukhtar. Where's your book? Just like I'm reading along, you're supposed to be what? Let me pull out my pen, right? Doing this, right? Moving forward, it then says, فَلَمَّا كَانَتِ اللَّيْلَةُ الرَّابِعَةِ. On the fourth night, what happened?
He only came out.
Ajaza. It says that the masjid was weak. The masjid couldn't hold the people. Literal translation. Ajaza. There was too many people. The companions kept coming. They wanted to pray with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The masjid couldn't what? Couldn't hold them. Ajaza masjid. You with me or not? What did the Prophet sallallahu say at that time? It says here. Listen carefully. It says, عَجَزَ الْمَسْجِدُ عَنْ أَهْلِهِ حَتَّى خَرَجَ لِصَلَاةِ الصُّبْحِ. When the Prophet went out to the morning prayer. Meaning that he didn't make the what? On the fourth night. Moving forward, Hadith says, فَلَمَّا قَضَى الْفَجْرَ أَقْبَلَ عَلَى النَّاسِ فَتَشَهَدَ ثُمَّ قَالَ أَمَّا بَعْدُ. He made Fajr and he turned around behind the people. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. He began and he said, "Amma ba'd," right? So what? To proceed. That's the what? Follows. Indeed. He then says, فَإِنَّهُ لَمْ يَخْفَ عَلَيَّ مَكَانُكُمْ. He says, I knew that you were there waiting for me. And the only reason that stopped me and prevented me from praying with you the fourth night was what? Out of fear that it would, and you wouldn't have the ability to do it every single night. You understand this? And it states in other narrations and other wordings, the Prophet, this only happened what? A few times. Everybody clear on this or not? So, Tarawih should be done in congregation when? All the time, according to those scholars. But the proof for it is something that was what? Only a few times. The Nafila prayers should not be made in congregation all of the time. But it is permissible to do it occasionally, and the proof of that is what? It's the difference now. Now obviously we said Umar what the Muslims did, the Khulafa who prayed behind him, the Fuqaha, the Ulama Sahaba in Medina. We're not discussing the issue. We're trying to show you how to deduce and how to mentally break down a fiqh issue. And how to have consistent what? Fiqh. Everybody got this or not? And this is why some of the ulama may say that Tarawih shouldn't be done in congregation every single night. In the way in which it's done now. And which is a standard thing, every single night we do the same thing. Everybody clear this or not? Everybody understand this? Right, moving forward. I know we don't even know what he then says. وفيه جواز النافلة في المسجد وإن كان البيت أفضل ولعل النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إنما فعل في المسجد لبيان الجواز أو أنه كان معتكفا. Another point from this hadith is the permissibility of making voluntary prayers in the masjid. It is not haram, it is not a bid'ah. He says, but it's best to make those voluntary prayers in one's home. But that's not the case if you want to forget them. Or you want to go home, you're going to do what? Tired, sleep, kids want to jump on you. Everyone understand this? Your wife want to start harassing you when you get in the door. Oh, why you're late, etc. Everyone understand this? Right? No offense to anybody. We're just being what? Realistic. Right? If you know you're not going to have the ability to make those prayers in the house, then it's best to do what? Pray in the house. Pray in that shit. Everyone understand this? But it's best to make those prayers where? In the home. We've explained this what? Many times before. I know what he says, and perhaps the Prophet ﷺ, he made those voluntary prayers in the masjid to show them that it was permissible, because he's also the same one who said the best prayer for a man to make is his home, except for the maktuba. Everyone understand this? Also, or another interpretation is what? Is that maybe he was making an itikaf, and he wasn't going to go to his home, his chambers, or his hujurat, but he was going to stay what? In the masjid, so he prayed his voluntary prayers where? In the masjid. Moving forward, An-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala even says, وَفِيهِ جَوَازُ الْاقْتِدَاءِ بِمَنْ لَمْ يَنْوِ إِمَامَتَهُ وَهَذَا صَحِيحٌ عَنْ الْمَشْهُورِ مِنْ مَذْهَبِنَا وَمَذْهَبِ الْعُلَمَاءِ. He says in this hadith is the permissibility of praying behind someone who didn't have the intention of leading you. The permissibility of praying behind someone who had no intention of leading you. I make my salah. I didn't know you were going to come behind me. It's permissible for you to stay behind me. That's what Nawawi says. Based off of this what? Deducing and extracting from the hadith. Yes. And this is the well-known Shafi'i statement, meaning that there are other Shafi'is or other opinions in the madhab that states what? Otherwise. He says that's the more the correct way. What's the style? In Brooklyn, is it the way it boots like this or the way like that? He said, no, this is it, trust me. But I saw some Brooklynites, what? You say, no, that's not the what? That's not the more the well-known established way. Everyone understand this? Even though there are a few people, what? Everyone understand this? It's a madhab. Everybody know this? Tell you, he's really not from what? Brooklyn. He came from Long Island, then he what? Migrated. Or he was down south for some years, or in another city for some time. Then he, everyone understand this? Or even if he is from Brooklyn, it's just what? It's not the way. This is a madhab, right? The Shafi'i rahimahullah may not have said this statement. It's not authentically traced back to him. Or this disciple said it. Or this one. Or became abrogated. And all the Shafi'is unanimously agreed later on. Wahakada. This is the dynamics of a what? Of a madhab, like we explained. And studying the madhab is not always a simple piece of or slice of cherry pie, as they try to make it. It's not always that what? That's
Black and
simple.
white.
There are levels of studying anything. You don't give a baby a whole entire fish. You don't give a 2-year-old or 3-year-old a fish. You give them what? Fillet fish. If even that. Mush it up, mash it up. You let them just take everything. The levels to what I feed someone. Whether it is a madhab or whether it is what? Other than a madhab. And the people, they just lie shamelessly, unfortunately, that a madhab is just, heaven. It's simple. Fiqh is clear, easy. You'll become a fiqh. You're a master, just like that. Because you said that's not what? That's not true. There are levels to a what? Madhab. And there are many confusing things in the study of it. From you guys can see from our humble basic classes. Moving forward, Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he then says, وَمَذَهَبُ الْعُلَمَاء, he says in the scholars. What is meant by that? All of them, he says مَذَهَبُ الْعُلَمَاء. لكن إن والإمام إمامتهم بعد اقتدائهم حصلت فضيلة الجماعة له ولهم ولم ينويها حصلت لهم فضيلة الجماعة ولا يحصل الإمام على الأصح لأنه لم ينويها والأعمال بالنيات وأما المأمومون فقد نووها. Then he goes into a deeper issue. He says, if the Imam has the intention of leading them, he says, بعد اقتدائهم, after he knows that they're there, then he will get the reward for the Jama'ah, and they as well. And they what? And they as well. So I'm praying by myself, and I know that you come behind me, you're standing behind me. And now I have the intention of leading you and finishing my prayer as an Imam. Then both of us get the what? The reward. As far as if he doesn't have this intention, he doesn't make his intention, then they will get the Jama'ah, and he will not. He will not what? He will not what? Ala al-asah, he says, according to the right way. Once more, is that there are others in the Shafi'i madhab who may say, you understand this? He says because he didn't make his intention, and these are based off of intention. Everyone understand that hadith? How many fiqh issues apply to that? What? One part of the hadith. These are only based off what? Intentions. I know what he says, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says they get the reward without a doubt because they had the intention of getting the Jama'ah. طيب. وفيه إذا تعارضت مصلحة أو مصلحة وخوف مفسدة أو مصلحتان اعتبر أهمهما لأن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كان رأى الصلاة في المسجد مصلحة لما ذكرناه فلما عرضه خوف افتراض عليهم تركه لعلم المفسدة التي تخاف من عجزهم وتركهم للفرض. النووي رحمه الله, he says another benefit from this hadith, and this goes to show us the richness of the sunnah. We're only discussing what? One hadith. We still what? One hadith. The sunnah is rich. He says here, this also shows us is that when we have a benefit and we have a harm or two benefits, then we give precedence to the most important, to the biggest, to the best of the two. Everyone understand this? So first and foremost is there is a good thing we can get and a bad thing we can avoid, or that's going to happen. Which of the two do we put forth? I know we didn't say we get rid of the maslahah, and no. He says whatever is greater, and this also applies to da'wah. One may say, well, if you go here to this masjid, or you do this, or you speak here, this is going to happen, and this problem is going to take place, right? Right or wrong? And they may. And they say, well, or the next one, he says, it's a benefit of me going there. People want to learn, I want to open up the doors. He says, no, the maslahah is never obtained in front of the what? The mafsada. No, he didn't what? He didn't say it. He says, which is the what? Greater of the two.